Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight King of Cards. In the last part we continued our way here through Birder Bluffs, and now it's time for us to go face off against once again another familiar foe. Also, I don't think I mentioned it across all 4 campaigns to this point, but I might be wrong because, it's been 4 years since Shovel of Hope's LP. If you lose to a traveling champion, the money just stays there and they move elsewhere on the map, just run into them again. We're close friends. Fresh meat soon. Then it's time to see if this journey has been worth it. You there! Are those your dogs? I love dogs, but shouldn't they be on a leash? These are spin wolves, friend, and only a raving fool would disrespect them. Ooh, cute and yet fearsome. They're trained for combat, I presume. We train each other. You seem sturdy. How about I give you a little demonstration? Polar Knight returns, but this time he's got some spin wolves around for the ride. They're not that big of a threat, but when it comes to trying to dash across the floor through his attacks, they can cause a little bit of a kerfuffle. With that said, they're still spin wolves, so they don't have that much health, and after you get rid of them, the fight becomes a slightly more aggressive version of Polar Knight all the same. He can still guard above his head with the shovel to prevent you from doing any spins on top of him. He can cause platforms to rain from the sky. He can jump down and cause the floor to become spikes, which is still instant kill, but he can also eventually cover that with snow in some form. Keeping movement going in this fight's very important, just to keep yourself away from any spikes that might generate. So a good idea might be to start on one side of the screen as he shows up, and then just slowly move the opposite way until he eventually causes the snow to get reset in some form or another. With that said, he's a large enough target where he never gets to do things that are too out there in my relative experience. Plus for me, he was guarding this little treasure hoard. My fellow noble, have you ever seen the crater of the Void of Darkness? If you're ever brought there, you needn't be afraid as long as you've used a rejuvenating decree. So if we see a giant crater use a decree of rejuvenation, speak of the devil, keep that in mind. It's actively never required even for 100%, but there is a weird, fun little thing locked behind that. It's also probably, barring this NPC, probably the most well-hidden thing in this particular campaign. But we'll talk about that later. But at this point, we've got a Polar Knight to go challenging Joustus, so let's go see what he has to say. I told him not to leave my spin wolves alone in the hold. Their breath will melt the hull. We may play Joustus, but I'll miss their keen senses. Polar Knight's deck is an interesting one. That while he has a lot of Cascade cards that have swaps and slams and all that, his big thing is actually focused on another new mechanic for this section, holes. The way holes work is that if a card is placed on them or pushed into them depending on their placement, a board goes over the top of the hole because they fall in and they are removed from the field and put back into the player's deck. At that point, you can play cards on top of the board or move them onto them should you need to. 90 merit medals already. Ahem. Are you daft? Yells the carpenter. Too large a box to lift it, you'd have to be as strong as an ox. The clockmaker thinks and he ticks and he talks and he says, who's got time to be moving their clocks? I don't know why, that one's always just made me giggle a little bit. Something about it's just so weirdly non sequitur compared to a lot of the other ones. Now, with the exception of the upcoming level, which is the gem level that spawned in, I've actually been playing the levels at this point in a pretty intentional order to open up that house that's to the northeast of the Joustus Hall for this area, as well as then go do the treasure hoard we just did that gave us that hint about the Decree of Rejuvenation at the Void Crater. Why? Because then we have the information for when we first actually reach that area. But that said, this specific gem level is actually completely based around birder platforms. These are things I think the game could have actively used a little more often because I think they're kind of interesting. The birders are just constantly moving in a Medusa head formation, waving across the screen. But you can actively tackle into the platforms and use them to get to higher places, and I think this could have been used in a full level to better effect. I can't help but wonder maybe if behind the scenes, maybe mechanics like this that just show up in levels like this are ones they maybe had ideas for full levels on, but they couldn't figure out ways to get more in depth with them. And if that's the case, hey, I get it. Game design is hard. There's a reason I'm glad I left that major and went into things that are much more my pace and all that jazz, because I would not have survived that major more than likely by the end of it. Also, notably, the birder platforms speed up when you're on top of them. But just as a little anecdote, in my years of school, back in college, the only major at my college that I saw that was regularly more stressed than the game design students was the pre-med and vet tech students. So, you know, medical adjacent fields. It was rough. Ooh, this place is pretty and also pretty flat. Well, if we venture over here to the left, we can see a familiar looking sign to prior campaigns. What are you doing here of all places? Hey, wait a minute, I recognize that in the background. Oh, a gold-clad guest with platinum panache. How lovely. Welcome to my fancy shop. I sell only the fanciest fashions. Clearly, you're in the right place. Look at that hat. It's positively regal. This is a crown, not a hat. Do you know what that makes me? Delightfully modest. Ah, a peek at my noble wares, mayhap? Sure. That's more money than you can ever hold. I'm good. Bye-bye. I guess we'll just have to come back here later. Sir, I implore you to make a purchase. No, I'm good. Most charitably, you're really overestimating my finances. Is there nothing that suits you? Come back. I was so looking forward to trying on a new hat. It's not a hat, it's a crown. I'm out of here. Uh-oh. End of the line, you tight-fisted curmudgeon. I'll have your hat if it's the last thing I do. Of course, Mr. Hat's still gonna be a boss fight. His attacks are entirely determined by what hat he's actively wearing. When he's wearing the spiked helm, he's focused on sword swinging. He can throw swords in the air that he can then get up to and swing his sword at normally, which will then cause him to fly almost directly at you. But he'll also randomly swap to a feathered cap, which allows him to bounce around on his cane, effectively like Scrooge McDuck, and do other things. New to King of Cards, though, is a third phase where he, I guess, becomes King Arthur. He's going to be very focused on melee attacks still, but not only can he pull a Mega Man X1 Sigma and bounce from wall to wall just to slam down on top of you, he can also pull in a horse buddy to ride on that you have to take care of separately, and he can also make a red carpet roll on the bottom of the screen. Whenever he lands from there or turns around on the horse, a shock will be sent along the carpet you need to dodge or just jump over in some form or manner. This fight can be a drain just because it's 2 health bars at a point where you might not be prepared for it, but it's far from the worst fight in the game. Because of how open he is from above at all times, there's still plenty of ways you can get some good, like, pogo combos off of him still, and some weapons here are pretty good on the whole, as long as they're pretty fast about hitting him before he jumps, which, especially in this phase, he really likes doing, as you can tell. You get a pretty good gold boost for that, too. Enough! I know not what came over me. Your hat, I can't look away. It shines and glimmers maddeningly. Just a bit of cabin fever, really. It's hard to make a friend or a sale in such a remote location. Well, that's all very interesting, but I'd better get going. I'd do anything for passage on your airship to escape this dead location. Here, lend me your rope. Here I am, hand in hand, with a new locale. My fancy shop is about to move on and up. Fine, fine, get on with it. Let's go, you're starting to give me a crown ache. Mr. Hat might canonically be the strongest Shovel Knight character. Because how is he carrying that thing with a single rope? All my thanks for this new location. It simply gleams with rustic potential. As for appointments, you're fancy enough to not need one. And I've lowered my prices just for you. So Mr. Hat's upgrades aren't upgrades per se, they're more just money sinks for extra things to have to spend your money on outside of the card game at this point. Welcome to the Grand Galley Gower Gala. The whole shop's discounted, but my exhibition's a limited edition. My practical wares make everything fancy, ready to be dazzled. Notably, you can give your UI a regal overhaul, which makes everything very gold and shiny. You can add some extra backings to your Joustus cards, and I guess technically more importantly, you can also give the look of the Glidewing 2 overhauls, actually. You can turn it silver from its wooden and iron look, and then from silver to gold. And you can then loop through all three again for free. Are these necessary? No, far from it, unless you're going for achievements and feats and getting all the purchases done. But I appreciate them having something that's not just the Joustus cards for you to spend your money on by endgame if you've gotten all the other upgrades. because it always does feel a little bad just letting all the money pile up when you have nothing else to do with it. And in some of the other campaigns, you can like get some healing items temporarily or other boosts with it for a little bit. Here in King Knight's campaign, there's no real extra purchases to make outside of stuff like that in Joustus. I'm Flower Dolly. I'm King Knight. Cool. So, do you know anything about hats? I'm in urgent need of a haberdasher. I need a beret. You ever been to the fancy shop? The proprietor is this guy. And for doing that, we get one of my favorite cards, actually, Mr. Hat. 3 2-power cards on top of a cascade effect. He can be really useful in a lot of scenarios, unless he has to go anywhere to the right. But even that gives you a pretty good way to have a pretty high-power card with something behind it to protect it. Or even then to push it into a better slot. The dream bells did toll, cold and true in the night. The seas frothed and churned with a furious fright. But the void of the darkness gets all in the end. Shall I hasten your final adventure, my friend? So we've heard the void of darkness before, even in this very video, and we know from that we should probably use it to create rejuvenation before talking to this guy again and actually accepting that deal. To my health! You found the fairy glade, my child. Fairies live here in the wild. Now fetch your favorite fairy, see? It's crucial, so pick carefully. Welcome to the Fairy Glade. This is sort of a follow-up to a mechanic that was present mostly in the Nintendo versions of Shovel Knight via Madame Meeber just there. She's known as the Amiibo Fairy, and if you put a character's amiibo onto the Nintendo systems, you can have a smaller version of the playable characters follow you around and actually interact with the world in some form, be it digging at dirt piles or circling around NPCs. But across here, you've got pretty much every named character and even some standard enemies across the Shovel Knight mythos. At least when it comes to main treasure trove, things from like Pocket Dungeon, Dig, and all that aren't included here. But you can choose whoever. There are notably little locales that represent levels and groups of levels from the game otherwise you can go to, and if you stay near one of those, more fairies will spawn in, generally from that relative vicinity. The annoying thing actively is choosing a fairy and trying to actually grab said fairy. Because the way it works is that when you press the attack button, you grab. And you can press it again to let go. You need to try and just grab whichever one you're looking for. For instance, I'm actively trying to grab Mona's fairy here, there on the right. But because when you grab one, the others all get pushed away, actively getting her in my grasp is a little rough. Now, I will say, I'm fast-forwarding this because it took a little bit. It doesn't ultimately matter too much who you pick here. Just pick whoever is your favorite character design or your active favorite character. It's not a big deal, but make sure you actually grab the one you're looking for at the end of the day. Oh, it's the Fairy of Research. How focused. Notably, every single fairy has their own little dialogue there in case you want to see as many as you can. Come out, feel the sun. The ceremony's just begun. Now throw your hands aloft and sing, we hail our newest fairy king. What? No, I want to be the king. Not that flittering pest, I'm the king. The fairy king, long live the fairy king. The fairy king, long live the fairy king, long live the fairy king. I love seeing King Knight in pain. How much of that was real? We'll never know. No, I'm the fairy king. I'm the fairy king. I'm the fairy king. That dream, huh? I find that sequence funny, but you never actively need to see it. I don't even think you need it to get all the achievements off the top of my head, but if future me, if I'm wrong about that, correct me, please. Worth noting, by the way, when you actually leave here, you are back at the homestead in the first chunk of the map, but getting back to where we need to go next is not a big deal at all. Sad thing is that it's probably going to be the closest I ever get to showcasing the amiibo stuff, because I've actively never owned a version of this game on Nintendo consoles. So even though while, like, the custom night stuff is available on PC, as is co-op nowadays, for instance, amiibo stuff is locked to that, and that's kind of sad because I do like the idea of those amiibo things. Alright, so this level's gimmick is the electric platforms on the floor. Whenever you or an enemy steps on them, they pulsate for a second before shooting an electric bolt out of both their top and bottom. Worth noting that the pulses, I believe, cannot harm enemies at all, but they can definitely harm you, so watch out. My best advice for this level, especially early on, when you first enter a screen, take a second to actually sit back and absorb what's going on, which I recommend doing in Mega Man adjacent platformers anyway, in case there's a platforming game you need to watch out for, but in a section like this especially, it's good to have a good grasp of what's happening around you before you actively just start rushing in. Also worth noting, and I know it's been happening on screen already, whenever you step on one of these, every single instance of those in the room you're in activates at once. So you really got to make sure you actually pause between steps of them in case there's multiple right next to each other. And also, I want to say if you use the scepter on one and go over it, like it's on the floor right here, that still will count for activating, but as long as you don't activate the scepter while on top of one, you're not likely to get hit by that, so that might be a good strategy to get past some of this section pretty quickly. Next up, the mechanic that's more present during the second half is the gears we've already seen a couple times throughout the game that are pretty prevalent in the original Tinker Knight level. Now, this is present in the other 3 campaigns as well, but if there is one other thing that the brevity of the levels for King Knight actively kind of makes a little more obvious, it's that the internal difficulty curve of a level, even if it is ultimately harder by endgame, is definitely still like a hills and valley type of situation, because you'll see one mechanic, they'll do as much as they can with that on its own, then they'll drop down to introduce the second mechanic, only to raise that up as you go through that mechanic, only then to peak at the end of the level, usually when they throw everything that the level has at you at once. It's good for level design and tutorialization of it, but it definitely makes levels that are this short and numerous feel a little more uneven than, say, the other 3 campaigns levels, which is one benefit that the length of the other levels definitely had for themselves, in that they had multiple checkpoints so they could do this multiple times and not have it stick out as much. And plus, as you got into a level, they had more levels mechanics they could throw at you at once rather than just 2, potentially. With that said, that's definitely a win some, you lose some situation, because that's kind of a cost of making the levels shorter to begin with, considering how much they pack into the level design here to begin with, on top of what's in the other 3 campaigns. Honestly, I think a very interesting way to have handled this campaign would have been to actively stack the levels as you got further into an aesthetic, but they can't really do that considering the Mario World adjacent world map, so it's very free reign with which levels you can do first in a given aesthetic. I guess if maybe they allowed you to do, say, the second Tinker Knight themed level only after the first one, but still allowed you to access the first level or even second level of the other 2 aesthetics first, that could have been a way to get around that, and let difficulty curve just continually climb throughout a world map, but it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. It's just something you tend to notice going through the game multiple times. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 12 we get this once again continue further into Birder Bluffs. See you guys then.